Is it addictive? Is it a drug? Caffeine.
Assuming pots of coffee, not cups, pots. I took the chemical composition of caffeine and presented it to an FDA scientist. And he looked at the chemistry and said, caffeine is just like a slap in the face. It is simply a temporary increase in alertness. Is there an appropriate way to use caffeine? And that's a complicated question. So it does have antioxidant benefits. Some benefit in terms of alertness, especially in older people. If that cup of coffee is going to get you off the couch and get you outside for a brisk walk, great, fabulous.
How do we know what camp we're in, whether caffeine's working for us or against us?
So there's a genetic component, because women have smaller livers than men. So because everyone wants it to be black and white, but it isn't.
Learning to use caffeine strategically. Today, we're going to talk with Stephen Chernisky, a leading biochemist, medical writer, trained nutritionist, and a caffeine expert, even a DHEA researcher. And we're going to talk about one of the most impactful changes that I've ever made to my health, and that is learning to use caffeine strategically. I've bounced and I've done no caffeine. I use it strategically. I used to drink a ton of caffeine. We're going to figure out how to decide what's right for you, to magnify its benefits, enhance it, and also to mitigate its downsides. But before we get into that, I want to get into your story, but two quick questions first. Stephen, you wrote a great book called Caffeine Blues. I want you to tell us, what is the craziest health issue or story you have about somebody not understanding that their health symptoms or issues were tied to caffeine? Do you have anything like that?
I have dozens, because in clinical practice, the reason I wrote the book was that in clinical practice, I kept having clients whose main problem was fatigue. And then I would look at their diet diary and their beverage diary, and I would see that they were consuming pots of coffee, not cups, pots of coffee. And so I would say, hey, we're going to have to work on your caffeine intake. And they would say, and I quote over and over again, they would say, but where am I going to get energy? And then I would have to explain that caffeine does not give you energy, right? It gives you the illusion of energy, but it isn't real energy. And that's how the conversation would go. But still, people would be incredulous, because they really truly believe that if they just had one more cup of coffee, that they would break through this brain fog. And I would say, no one has a caffeine deficiency. You've got to understand this very basic fact. And of course, would probably lose, I would say, a third of my clients, because for them, consider something other than 8 cups of coffee before noon was unthinkable, because they were that addicted.
Wow. And I was reading your book and a summary of it, and it was saying that some people, like mental health, like psychosis, like severe anxiety, do you have testimonials or people you've worked with whose anxiety was caffeine related? Or
Oh, for sure. Because again, as we'll discuss, hopefully in this interview, we'll discuss that some people, about 50% of people, are very slow metabolizers of caffeine. Their liver does not detoxify caffeine as rapidly as the other 50% of people. So there's a genetic component. So like now you've got it's usually a woman, and because women have smaller livers than men. So there's that factor. There's a gender factor. And then there's the genetic factor. So you have a woman who's a slow metabolizer, who's not drinking like a lot of coffee, but the coffee that she does consume, or the caffeine that she does consume, accumulates in her body and brain and triggers an anxiety attack. And that can manifest as just a general sense of foreboding or of fear or of anxiety. And it can go all the way to an absolute panic attack in which she is out of control from the anxiety and on her way to the ER. So, that's the issue that you mentioned at the very beginning of this discussion, which was, is there an appropriate way to use caffeine? And that's a complicated question, which we'll hopefully discuss further.
We will absolutely get there. But I am someone who runs a little hot. I'm a little anxious. I'm a little type A. And when I started to realize, oh, my caffeine was exacerbating that, it was impacting that. And for so many people, I've noticed so many women, especially, it's not that you can't use caffeine. You just have to know how and when and at what dose. And so we're going to get into all that. But also, before I get to your story, because I'm fascinated by, who you are and all of the different things you're getting into. Do you think, and this maybe isn't in question, is it addictive? Is it a drug, caffeine? Talk to me about that.
It's definitely a drug. In fact, in talking with people at the FDA years ago, I took chemical composition of caffeine and presented it to an FDA scientist and said, if I wanted to market this molecule and have people consume it on a daily basis, would you approve this drug? And he looked at the chemistry and said, oh, absolutely not. We would not approve this.
And here it is.
So
for one.
It is. So it is a drug. And in explaining this to people, I would tell them, hey, if you went to your doctor, right, and your doctor prescribed a drug, took out his or her prescription pad and wrote you a prescription and said, I want you to take this. Now, it's a powerful drug. I want you to take this drug. And on your way out the door, you looked at the prescription and you said, doctor, what's the dose that I should take? And the doctor says to you, oh, just take as much as you want. That's the situation that we're in. It is a powerful drug. And yet there's no guidance at all regarding how much to take and what to watch out for in terms of whether you're overdosing or not. That's the whole issue. That's the entire issue. Everything is dose related.
Yeah, everything is. And there is an incentive. Caffeine is a reinforcer. So when you add it to a product, add it to an experience, it enhances your enjoyment of both that sugary drink or whatever, sugary food, and like companies, manufacturers are incentivized to put this in there because it's going to make you want it more. So we're going to get into that. But first, tell us, Stephen, why did you become passionate about this in the first place? What's your story?
Again, because I'm in the business of helping people experience a higher level of health and wellness.
Yeah.
And so you can't get around the fact that in the healthcare arena, caffeine plays a critical role. But as you say, it's often overlooked. Conventional doctors rarely even ask you how much caffeine you're consuming. And so people have this idea that since it's ubiquitous in our society, since more people drink caffeine than any other beverage, and so because it's everywhere and because it's promoted everywhere, the idea in your mind of someone walking around with a drug that they take frequent sips of is accepted as normal, and yet it's really not. We joke about it. Don't talk to me before I've had my coffee, all right? All the little cute sayings on our coffee mug, right? Yeah. So it's treated as this kind of frivolous behavior, when in fact, it really requires some attention.
It does. And I'm so glad you wrote this book, Caffeine Blues. I can't find it right now because I've been reading it, but I think it was like back in the late 90s. And I remember right? 1998?
Yeah.
And I read it and I thought, oh, I should try a period without it. And it changed my life. And then I went to the other side and realized, okay, there are times and specific reasons we might want to have caffeine and then using it strategically. So before we're going to get into the detriments first and then the benefits and then how to use it. But first, how much are we having? Because I know 90% of us, I think, drink caffeine on a daily basis. And I read something like 50% of young people, even like preteens. So how many of us are consuming it and how much of it are we consuming? Do we really know?
We really don't know because, as you just said, it's in multiple products. In fact, when I was doing my research for Caffeine Blues, I learned that more people are addicted to Diet Coke than they are addicted to coffee. And so that's intriguing. And in fact, I got in trouble with the Coca-Cola company by saying negative things in my book about their beverage. But quite frankly, if you look at that, you have to understand that caffeine is very bitter. Why would a beverage company put caffeine in their beverage and then have to cover up the bitterness with sugar? That's because they're looking to addict you to their product. There's only one reason why Coca-Cola puts caffeine in their beverage, and that is to make it addictive. And boy, have they succeeded.
Yeah. And when you say you got in trouble, define that for me. What happened? Tell us that story.
We were scheduled in the book tour. Warner Books had me scheduled for Good Morning America and 2 other national shows. We had been doing regional shows, but the big exposure, you get Good Morning America and you get a couple of the national shows, and your book's going to be a bestseller. And so 2 weeks before GMA, as they call it, I get a call from Warner's attorney saying that your book tour has been canceled. And I said, what do you mean, GMA dropped out? She says, no, the whole book tour has been canceled. And I said, what's going on? Did I do something wrong? She goes, no, but you said some unkind things about Coca-Cola. And Warner Books is part of the Time Warner Company family of companies. And we have a very close relationship with Coca-Cola. So yeah, no book tour. And I said, how can that be? And she says, oh, Stephen, grow up.
Oh, that's okay.
That's the way the real world works. And I went, oh, wow, okay.
Oh my gosh. So what did you do? How did you?
I just said, that's the way it is. Life goes on. I've got plenty of other things to do. I later on wrote a book called The Metabolic Plan, which was a bestseller for Random House. So it wasn't that I had nothing to do. But again, and Warner, right after the first edition, canceled the second edition. If you want to buy a copy of Caffeine Blues, you cannot find it in Barnes and Noble. You'll have to order it from Amazon. And then, of course, then Amazon won't go back to Warner Books. Amazon will just print their copy and send it to you, which is just, we're in a strange world regarding publishing right now, but that's besides the point.
Wow. I'm blown away by that. And we know that Coca-Cola before has been in trouble for some of the research, the Global Energy Balance Network, research coming out saying that you just need to move more and eat less. So yes, as we see, I think the world's waking up to this fact that corporations have a lot of power, but that's why we do conversations like this. And
Right.
So thank you for being honest and for persevering and writing more books, because the word's getting out there, right? So people are onto this. Okay, so now let's talk about the broad effects of caffeine in the body first. So when we're drinking a little caffeine, just take us through the chain of events. Like, what bodily systems is it impacting? Like you said, maybe not giving us energy, maybe alertness, but just give us the broad effects and then we'll go into the detriments and the benefits.
The main thing, which is important for people to get, is how caffeine works. Number one, your brain has this mechanism that tells you when it's time to rest. And that mechanism, I'm going to simplify it a little bit, but that mechanism is the accumulation of a chemical called adenosine. And as adenosine accumulates, it binds to adenosine receptors in the brain. And at that point, you're going to get drowsy, and because this is the natural way that your brain resets. After you've been very busy, after you've been awake for a period of time, the adenosine is going to be accumulating and it's going to bind to those receptors, and that means you're going to get drowsy. This is just the way the brain works. What do you know? Caffeine binds to adenosine receptors so that your adenosine stops accumulating. So the natural signal that's going to tell you to rest is circumvented. It's canceled. And so you maintain alertness, even though you should be resting. And that alertness is what we mistake for energy. And it isn't energy. It's like if your husband said, hey, honey, slap me across the face as hard as you can, because I need to be more alert for this job that I'm doing. And you said, really, honey, you want me to slap you in the face? And he goes, yeah, because why? It would really wake up your husband, but you wouldn't think of doing that 3 or 5 times a day. Caffeine is just like a slap in the face. It is not energy. It is simply a temporary increase in alertness. Now, the problem with that when you are negating the effects of adenosine, that triggers another chemical reaction, which is your adrenals are going to start pumping out stress hormones, because your adrenals are saying, this is not normal. Something's going wrong. There must be an emergency. So all of a sudden now you get a higher level of epinephrine, other stress hormones. And that can trigger the fight or flight response, in which case your heart rate increases, your blood pressure increases, just like you're in the ancient times, right? When you were face to face with a saber-toothed tiger, you knew that you had to either fight or flight. Right? And so the same fight or flight mechanism is triggered by your adrenal glands, and that stresses your adrenals, it stresses your nervous system, it stimulates anxiety, and ultimately, in some people, flat out panic attacks. And again, the insomnia issue is real because as you negate the effects of adenosine, you then find that you're laying down at night and it's difficult to get to sleep. It's difficult to stay asleep because you have thrown a monkey wrench into the body's natural rhythm of rest and activity.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you. And what people need to understand too is with that cortisol release, cortisol is a hormone. Cortisol and blood sugar related. Cortisol is like the basis of your hormones, right? When that gets out of whack, estrogen, testosterone, progesterone, like they can all be negatively impacted. On the other side, we can use that strategically in some circumstances, right? There are timing issues. Your cortisol goes up in the morning. Maybe if you delay when you drink it, we'll talk about that too. But I wanted to also talk about demonstrated benefits. So I've read about improved reaction time or potentially dementia prevention or mitigation. So on the other side of the coin, when you use it strategically, what does the literature say about the potential benefits of caffeine?
Well, number one, I would put antioxidant benefits, because if you look at the chemistry of coffee, for example, you take the bean and you ferment it, which changes the chemistry, and then you roast it, which changes the chemistry, and then you brew it, which changes the chemistry. So by the time you're finished with this bean, you've created thousands, not hundreds, you've created thousands of discrete molecules, many of which have antioxidant activity. So for somebody, for example, whose diet is poor, very few fruits and vegetables, right? That cup of coffee may be the only antioxidant rich food that they consume that day. So there's that benefit. So it does have antioxidant benefits. The literature around the prevention of dementia is conflicting. But I have to say that I have not seen any evidence that caffeine would increase. Whether or not it's a great benefit in preventing dementia remains to be seen. But it does have some benefit in terms of alertness, especially in older people. And that alertness, as you pointed out, translates to a better reaction time, better information processing speed, memory and cognition benefits. So again, but we're talking about people who are over age 50, for example. And then there's the benefit for men, because caffeine is a diuretic. So there are plenty of men post 65, for example, because men over 65 usually have some enlarged prostate, which is causing a problem with their urine stream. And caffeine, there's millions of men who are managing that with caffeine. And so that is a benefit, because if they didn't have the caffeine, then they would have to use a drug. The most common drug is Flomax, but multiple doses of Flomax are a problem because you get into the adverse effects of the drug. So there's a lot of men out there, especially my age, who are using caffeine to minimize their need for drugs to improve urination.
I love that. And I've read, and tell me what you've seen about mood, that there might be an inverse association for people who drink it with depression. We know that too much can push you into that anxious state. I am also wondering if somebody exercises more because they have a little caffeine. I think exercise is the most powerful medicine in the world. Would you argue that might be a helpful usage?
Say that again, because I want your listeners to understand that exercise is the most important part of your routine. I'm a nutritional biochemist, And if you asked me which was more important, diet or exercise, I would not hesitate to say it's exercise.
I believe you. I feel the same. I think food is second. I think food's a powerful lever, but if something motivates you to exercise,
Yep.
let's do it.
I totally agree. So if that cup of coffee is going to get you off the couch and get you outside for a brisk walk, great, fabulous. Let's don't miss it, because if that's what you need to get off the couch, wonderful. And again, a lot of people use caffeine, especially athletes, endurance athletes, because caffeine does have another benefit, not for the person going to the gym and working out with some weights. Caffeine really doesn't have any benefit there. But for anybody exercising for more than, say, an hour or two, caffeine has a real benefit. So for endurance athletes, caffeine has the effect of improving the utilization of fat as an energy source, so that an endurance athlete will find that they have a better kick at the end of the race if they have some caffeine about an hour or 45 minutes before the race.
I love that.
It's real.
I love that. And we'll talk about caffeine cycling and how to really leverage that. But I'm also curious, I haven't really looked into this much, but weight loss, obesity, can it be, I know that it is like a GLP-1 agonist. Could it help people to lose weight? Have you seen that?
I would have to go back to the literature. And of course, today is so much easier with AI to access the literature and to make it understandable. So I'm going to pass on that. I don't think that caffeine is a great GLP-1 agonist. I think there's plenty of those molecules that do a better job than caffeine. Natalie and my wife and I are working on right now on a product that's basically based on a fiber product called Fibersol, which is a powerful GLP-1 agonist, which we can talk about sometime in the future. But caffeine does have that effect, that it enhances the secretion of GLP-1 in your gut, which can theoretically help with weight loss.
I love that. And what I've learned that I think is really important before we go into how do we know if it's working for or against us and how to use it, I want to normalize rhythm, right? Because there's a time and a place to put your pedal to the metal, right? An important event. But there's also a very important thing that I think we've lost touch with as a culture, and that's recovery, what goes up should come down. And so how do we not use caffeine to override our internal wisdom and what we need for our body? And I also see, when you're looking at, do I need more energy? Do I need more caffeine? What is depleting your energy? Start there too. Investigate, are there relationships draining your energy? A job that you're why are you in such need? And where are you sleeping poorly? I just think those are all really important elements of your life to consider too. But what do you think? How do we know what camp we're in, whether caffeine's working for us or against us? What are the factors at play? Genetics, lifestyle factors? Just tell us what you think.
Wow. I think it's important that we establish right away that there's a genetic factor, which is really important. And that was only discovered 2 years after I wrote the Caffeine Blues. So I wrote Caffeine Blues not knowing this, that 50% of people, roughly 50% of people, are rapid metabolizers. And this has to do with the genetics of your liver. And so because caffeine is a drug, it's a xenobiotic molecule that when it hits your body, your liver says, "Ooh, I got to detoxify this drug." And so some of us, myself included, are rapid metabolizers. So for example, I could consume 5 cups of coffee a day if I wanted to, and I would have no problem sleeping. Whereas a slow metabolizer, and again, it's about 50-50. So you have half of the population who's slow metabolizers, which means they're going to accumulate caffeine during the day, which means it's going to have an adverse effect on them. And there's 50% of people who go, "Oh, I can have coffee with dinner and I don't have any problem sleeping." And you go, how can that possibly be? Because they're a rapid metabolizer. Now, you could have a genetic test, which is readily available to show whether you're a CYP1A1 rapid metabolizer. You could do that, or you could just understand what happens to you when you have caffeine later on in the day. Take your pulse. right? If your pulse went from 65 to 78 beats per minute, you just had an effect, which is probably going to have an adverse effect on your sleep later on that evening. And I've done this with hundreds of people. Like you take your pulse and then you have your coffee. And then 10, 15 minutes later, take your pulse again. And if your pulse is significantly faster, and if you're feeling a little bit like on edge, then you need to understand you're a slow metabolizer.
I love that.
There shouldn't be an effect on your heart rate. There shouldn't be an effect on your blood pressure. If you're a coffee consumer, that should be something which is just that gives you a mild sense of alertness, perhaps a little bit brighter mood. All these things are benefits of caffeine, but the idea that a person who's a slow metabolizer, they need to be cautious using this drug because, as you point out, the adverse effects are sometimes not easy to pinpoint because it can be something along the lines of inappropriate aggressive behavior. You suddenly get angry at your coworker when that's not really who you are, but you just snapped at your coworker. Oh, and then you realize, oh yeah, I had that cup of coffee before I left for the office. And then I had that cup of coffee while I was driving to the office. And dang, I forgot I had that third cup of coffee when I got to the office. And that was probably too much. And it caused me to lash out at my coworker.
Oh, I love that example because that's what I notice is I'm just a little irritable. People can't do things fast enough. I'm mad at my husband. And I think that was your book that I read that if someone gets in a car wreck and they don't take your caffeine level, but your aggressive mood and your rage could be at least partially induced by caffeine unknowingly.
Look at the size of the travel mugs.
Scary, right?
When you look at the amount of caffeine, right? So it's 100 milligrams of caffeine to a cup of coffee. What size is a cup? A cup is 6 ounces.
Oh.
A cup, people, is 6 ounces. Who drinks 6 ounces of coffee? Nobody.
Europeans.
A mug is 12 ounces. So all right there, you already have two cups. And then the travel mugs, some of these travel mugs are so enormous. It's 6 cups of coffee in one travel mug. So like you say, you're in traffic and you're just pounding this drug. And now you get into a traffic situation where you become very aggressive, road rage, and you're cutting off other drivers. It's just so crystal clear that this is a problem that is not addressed at all because these coffee mugs keep getting bigger and bigger as people need a higher and higher dose to get the same effect.
Yes, love that. So you're saying 6 ounces is about 100 milligrams of caffeine. I know that would vary by the source and all of that. And I know in your book, I think you broke it down. And in the research, it's like 1 to 3 milligrams per kilogram. So in the research, we're looking at how much do you weigh and how much should you have? And that is, nobody talks about that here. Many times it's not even labeled. So could you give us some paint a broad picture for us? Give us some of the most common sources of caffeine in our diet. And that might surprise people. And how much are you consuming when you're consuming those sources? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, again, you're looking at a cup of coffee or a 6 ounce cup of coffee, which is about 100 milligrams. So figure most people would have a mug. So that's close to 200 milligrams. A large Starbucks is 300 milligrams right there. And people will have a Starbucks cup of coffee. So again, 300 milligrams. And then you've got the next most common source of caffeine in high doses are the energy drinks. And the fact that these beverages are allowed to use the word energy is a legal loophole because they're not giving you energy. There is no energy in this beverage except for maybe the sugar, which contains calories. But the FDA allows them to put energy on their label because it contains caffeine, and the FDA is confusing alertness with real energy. So the next most common source of a significant dose of caffeine, of course, is our energy drinks. And I've been on dozens of shows to talk about how bad these energy drinks are, because that's where you get the whopping dose of caffeine, 200 milligrams, 300 milligrams. And people don't just have one of those little cans. They have multiple cans. And so I was hired to do an analysis of injury rates with high school and college athletes. And one of the things that I was looking at was their caffeine content. And so we went into locker rooms with my camera, and I'm taking pictures of the trash cans. And the trash cans in these locker rooms, these high school and college athletes, filled with empty cans of these energy drinks, because these athletes are going out into the field, they're going out into the court primed for what? Injury. Why? Because caffeine in an overdose is an inflammatory effect on the body. So you're putting athletes on the field and putting athletes on the floor, on the court, or wherever they are, that are highly inflamed, and they're involved in ballistic sports, which is putting stress on their tendons, ligaments, and joints. And you wonder why the level of injury is skyrocketing as a direct result of the beverages, and no one is talking about that.
Oh, I know. It scares me so much because I feel like it's so dangerous. Maybe there's heart-related issues, but when I was a drinking girl, I don't drink alcohol anymore, but I used to drink those drinks with energy and alcohol, and now some of them are illegal. And so I think that's really important to emphasize. And I don't think caffeine is particularly helpful for children as they develop, what's the research around that? Would you? Yeah.
Not helpful at all.
Yeah.
Of no benefit whatsoever.
Yeah. Even for, say, attention-related issues, is there a place for that? Do you think it could improve given its dopamine release? Or do you still say no at no age, even teenage? What do you think?
I would say no, simply because there are such better ways to enhance cognition and performance. There's a compound derived from saffron that has a profound effect on cognition, anxiety, and stress in children, which is perfectly safe. To use caffeine is crazy.
Okay, I like that. And what about tea? What if we're drinking tea? Is that different?
Yeah, it's different because tea contains theanine, which blunts the stimulant effect of caffeine. So most people who are sensitive to caffeine can have tea and do quite well. Green tea has some significant polyphenols in it that are beneficial. Green tea, matcha green tea has other benefits which are significant. Yeah, I think most people are going to be fine with tea. The other place you're going to get a bunch of caffeine, of course, is the diet sodas. And those really do seem to be addictive. My wife is a physician, and she'll have her patients always do a diet and beverage diary. And it's not unusual for someone to consume 6, 8, 10, 12 cans of diet soda a day. And when she suggests that they reduce that, they look at her like, that's impossible. I can't go a day without at least eight cans of diet soda. So that's real, and something, again, which the diet soda industry is not going to talk about. I've been on a plane as I'm sitting in the plane, and the flight attendant is coming down, taking people's beverage requests. And maybe you've done this too. Listen to the beverage requests: Diet Coke, coffee, Diet Coke, coffee. It's crazy.
It is absolutely crazy. So we're all drinking so much caffeine. So like maybe 100, 200 milligrams per day, you're probably in the safe zone. 400 to 600, maybe we need to look at that. And over 600, 700, I think we're in dangerous territory. Tell me if you agree. And then how do we find our individual caffeine quotient? Like, how do we find that amount that works for us?
I think that you're exactly right in terms of your milligrams of caffeine. I think you hit the nail right on the head. Regarding how one finds out, the quality of your sleep is probably the easiest way. And your heart rating, your blood pressure is probably the second way. And then do what you did, which is to try going off caffeine for a while, because that's very revealing. If you go zero caffeine, I'm going to do zero caffeine for a week and see how I feel. That's an important act to use, because very often people say, oh, I went off caffeine for a week and I slept better than I had been sleeping for decades. Oh my God, I had no idea it was affecting my quality of sleep. And if you follow anything related to health and wellness these days, sleep is finally being talked about as the most critical factor. Because what? You said it yourself. There is a natural rhythm to activity and recovery. And if that recovery is not significant, if you don't get into what is called S4 sleep, which is the deepest level of sleep where all the recovery happens, you don't recover much in dream sleep, right? And that's where caffeine is going to keep you. It's going to keep you in S1, S2. But to get into deep sleep, which is the slow wave sleep, you can't get there if you haven't detoxified every molecule of caffeine you consume that day. It's really important that people understand that the recovery process is just as important as any activity that you would do during the day. We want you to be active. We want you to be doing 2 types of exercise, both aerobic and strength training. We want you to do both, right? Not just one or the other. And then we want you to have a profound sleep experience where all of those little micro tears in your muscle get to repair so you don't end up being sore after you exercise. This is another thing. People have told me they went off caffeine for 1 week and they found that when they worked out, they weren't sore the day after. Hello?
Because you're recovering.
You were able to recover from the stress of exercise. So again, it's all about this wonderful thing called balance. People use caffeine because they are thinking that it's going to help them with balancing their activity and their recovery, but it's doing exactly the opposite.
Yeah, I'm going to talk about how I cycle it because I do. That's what I do now. But first, the timing too. Hormones in the morning, they come up naturally, cortisol. And you might not want to drink coffee on top of that because it could exacerbate that. And I've also heard that you can clear that adenosine if you let that cortisol, maybe get some light, get some exercise, we can clear that adenosine. But that if you put the coffee in the mix or the caffeine, that it will prevent that. So let's talk about the timing. And then there's a half-life of caffeine. So like what time of the day, if you're going to drink it, would you drink it? And when would you cut yourself off and maybe move to decaf if you still need that flavor? I love the flavor. And so I have decaf in the afternoon. But what would you suggest around timing?
I think you, again, hit the nail on the head, that if you look at the normal level of cortisol in the morning, it should be rising as you're moving into your day. As you're moving into the alert time of your cycle, it's good to have that little boost of cortisol. So again, you just said something which is pretty profound, which is what if you woke up in the morning and then went for a walk? Metabolically, you're doing multiple things. Number one, you're looking at your metabolism in terms of alertness, which is, so you're going to extend that period of alertness before you hit it with caffeine, but you're also prolonging the fat burning mode of metabolism, because pretty much everyone, unless you ate at 9 o'clock at night, let's say you're a normal person and you stop eating at 7:30. All right. Most people are in fat burning mode by about 3 a.m. So from 3 a.m. and now you go and now you're waking up at 6 a.m. So you're still in fat burning. If instead of going downstairs and having coffee and carbs, if you just went for a walk, you would extend that fat burning activity all the way through until you actually have some starch or some carbohydrate at lunch. So it's really intriguing that caffeine can play a role, but if you delay that a little bit, you get more benefit than if you just slam that cup of coffee. There are lots and lots of people who have their coffee maker on auto, so that it's literally brewing their coffee before they get out of bed. They're that, and that's just a bad idea.
Yeah, and I like to delay on the days that I do it, and we'll talk about when that is, maybe to 2 hours after I wake up, and then I will drink all the caffeine I'm going to have that day, like within a 1-hour window, because I know caffeine has a long half-life, and you're going to still be metabolizing that depending upon your genetics, right? Maybe 12 hours later. Is that true? How long is it going to take to get out of your system?
A slow metabolizer is going to have caffeine remaining in their bloodstream, stimulating their nervous system for 12 hours. Yep.
Yep. Yeah. And so I like to go to bed around 9. And so, yeah, I got to cut myself off around 9.
You're hitting you're checking all the right boxes for behavior. Bravo.
Okay, well, thanks. And I know it's so boring, but I love it. And now let's talk about cycling. So I like to do it where on a power week, I'll do 1 day on and 1 day off, and then 1 day on and 1 day off. And I usually pair the day on with, I have an interview, or I want to do high intensity interval training and I need that extra boost. I feel like it helps. I've also done it where in the week I use it and then I take the weekends off, or maybe with my cycle, like I use it in the first part of my cycle, the follicular and the ovulatory, and then I cut it off in the luteal. Now, is there research around that, or what is a strategic, intelligent, evidence-based approach to cycling, if there is one?
There's no research because what you're talking about is very intelligent and very individualized. And so you're not going to find anybody doing any research on large numbers of people who have a specific cycling strategy. But for you, I'm saying that you're brilliant in terms of being aware of how it's affecting you and how it benefits you. So again, if that works for you, I think that's marvelous. I think that, again, we could just suggest to anyone watching this to start to look at that and start with going a week without any caffeine at all to see how that affects you. A lot of times people say, no, last time I tried to do that, I got a splitting headache. And then you have to think, why did you get a splitting headache? Have you ever thought about that? What was it about with caffeine withdrawal that gave you a splitting headache? And what it was will surprise you. What it was, suddenly, without the caffeine, which reduces circulation in your brain, right? Caffeine reduces circulation in your brain. And so when you stop consuming caffeine, all of a sudden those blood vessels then dilate. And so the increased circulation in the brain causes the headache.
Oh, no. So you're starving your brain.
Yes. So sometimes people say, I can't get off caffeine even for a week, Stephen, because the last time I tried to get off caffeine, I got a splitting headache. So I would then say, okay, let's do this. Taper off caffeine slowly, just like you would taper off any other drug. Taper off the caffeine until such time as you can go for at least 1 whole week without any caffeine. And then let's evaluate your stress level, evaluate your mood, evaluate your sleep quality. And that's very revealing for most people.
I love that. And I have, first of all, you need to know where you're living, how much caffeine. So that's step number 1. Caffeine inventory, how much, just track, right? Then cut it down by 100 milligrams a day, 50 milligrams a day, whatever. I've also read that supplementing with a little extra vitamin C could potentially help. Do you have any other like nutraceuticals, nutrients? Because I know you're also depleting nutrients when you're drinking a lot of caffeine. Is there anything that you've seen be helpful in this withdrawal process?
Certainly there is, in terms of helping people experience greater energy. So bioenergetics is a wonderful science, because what people say, where am I going to get the energy if I don't slam like 8 cups of coffee a day? I say, well, let's take a look at where energy comes from. 70% of all the energy of your life is created by your muscles. So let's look at your exercise routine and see if we can't create a little more energy there. Within each of those muscles, there are, in every muscle cell, there are these energy factories. Because if we're getting down to where energy is really created, which is the mitochondria of your muscles. So let's talk about, is there a way to increase the number of mitochondria in your muscles? And the answer is, yeah, it's called exercise. Right? But what kind of exercise? Because people say, and again, between my wife and I, we've counseled thousands of clients and patients and helped them to understand the critical role that exercise plays. Now, there are things you can do to enhance that in addition to just the exercise. There's the type of exercise. You walk into our house and you will see on the living room floor here and there, you'll find barbells. And people always say, what the heck? What do you have barbells? We say they're there because they talk to us. We're very busy people. It's easy for us to forget that we should be lifting heavy objects because it's part of our genetic makeup. Our genetic makeup requires this, and we want to be in sync with our genes. And so we have those laying around the living room. And they say to us as we walk by, hey, pick me up. So we have to understand that the strength training increases the number of mitochondria in your muscle cells, and that will generate more energy and you will require less caffeine. Are there things that you can add to your exercise? Yeah, coenzyme Q10 is a good bioenergetic compound. Creatine is a bioenergetic compound that you can and should supplement, especially if you're over 60 years old. And there's all kinds of, we can spend an hour talking about creatine. Are there other molecules that people can use to help them generate more energy? Hydroxymethylbutyrate, HMB, is another one, commonly available, safe, can be used by anyone, whether you're an athlete, a weekend warrior, or you're a person who wants to maintain your muscle mass as you get into that critical phase of life past age 50. And age 50, you're at a crossroads. You can go one way or the other, and it's your choice. And one of the things that's most important is to understand how difficult it's going to be to maintain your muscle mass past age 50. All those things you did when you were 20 and 25 and 30, all those things you did to maintain your muscle mass, those things don't work anymore when you're 55. You have to do other things. And if all you're doing is taking higher and higher doses of caffeine, thinking that's going to get it done for you, you're sorely mistaken. That's a path that's going to drive more inflammation, more damage, and it's going to blunt your recovery from whatever exercise you are doing.
I love that point. And that's what I use. I don't do caffeine every day, but I use it to reinforce those higher intensity workouts, but I don't do those every day. I'm over 40. And so I do those 2-3 times a week, and I bring that caffeine. It helps me take that intensity up. And then on my more muscular resistance training days, I'm not drinking caffeine because I think that's a little more laid back. And I love that, like, you leave things in your sight. Same thing. If you don't want to drink a bunch of energy drinks and sugary drinks, don't have them in your house reminding you of their presence. Just keep them out. Okay. So do you have time for 2 more questions?
Sure.
Okay, great. So now I want to know, okay, I'm going to go here first because I know I just learned this about you. You are also a hormone expert, DHEA. My DHEA's levels have always been really low, and I'm very sensitive to caffeine. I'm wondering, do you see that? Women who are highly stressed, that's another variable. Women who are have hormonal profiles of a certain type, or these considerations that we should be thinking about when we're talking about our caffeine intake?
Yes, because low DHEA, which is not just common, it's rare that we'll do a hormone profile on a woman who's over 40 years old. It's rare that we would find a woman anywhere near the optimal range.
Yeah.
And even if she goes to her doctor's going to tell her that she's normal. Why is that? Because the reference range has nothing to do with optimal. The reference range is only telling you, yeah, you have about as much DHEA in your bloodstream as other women your age. Whoa. So we're all deficient, and you're telling me that's normal. Oh my God, how insane is that? So is there an optimal range? And there absolutely is. If you want to go and measure your DHEA, first of all, you have to make sure you're asking for the right test. You're asking for the DHEAS, the DHEA sulfate. You don't want to know how much DHEA is in your blood, because that's just a snapshot of what was in your blood when they put the needle in your arm. You want to know what is your DHEA status, and that's the sulfate form. So you get your DHEAS, and your doctor will tell you that you're normal. I guarantee that you'll be normal. But what you want is optimal. And for a woman, that's somewhere between 200 and 350 micrograms per deciliter. Between 200 and 350 is the sweet spot for women in terms of DHEA. And that means what? Well, if you get into that sweet spot, you will find your mood improves. You will find your coping mechanism dramatically improves. Our tagline for DHEA for women is can do in a capsule.
I love it.
Because it dramatically improves your resilience, your ability to exercise and get benefit from that exercise. Because why? DHEA is an anabolic. It's the number one anabolic in your entire body. Now, men have another anabolic called testosterone. But the wonderful thing about DHEA is a woman will convert some of that to testosterone in the appropriate amount at the appropriate places in her body. So again, we could talk about DHEA for the next day or two, but it has a profound effect on resilience, energy, mental clarity, which means that you will be far more likely to be able to moderate your caffeine intake than if your DHEA was deficient.
Yeah. And I hope you'll come back and talk to me all about, I'd love to do an entire episode on DHEA because I think it's so important. And it's something I've toyed with starting, but I always like to push off interventions as long as I can. And I feel pretty good right now, but I have no doubt it's something I will start taking eventually, for sure. And then, okay, so my last two questions for you, and you can combine them. I want to know what your approach is to caffeine. Are you using it? What does your daily routine look like? And when you're looking at decaf, is all decaf created equal? Do you think decaf is the proper replacement?
Number one, where you're going decaf, that's an easy one. You want to have a water process or a Swiss process decaf. You don't want to be drinking a lot of solvents. So a Swiss process or a water process decaf is what you're looking for, and those are readily available. In regards to my personal use of caffeine, I have found that as I'm now 77, I'll be 78 in a few months. And so I'm consuming a little more caffeine now than I used to. And again, I'm carefully watching my sleep. So again, if I find that 2 cups, 3 cups, sometimes 4 cups, and we're talking about small cups, I'm not talking about mugs, but I'll have sometimes 4 cups of coffee in a day, especially if I'm very active and I've got a couple of deadlines. I am a very active individual, and so is my wife. And she doesn't use any caffeine, by the way, zero caffeine. And so she puts up with me and caffeine habit because it does not make me aggressive. It does not make me irritable. It does not make me anxious in any way. So she's fine with me having 3-4 cups of coffee a day. So I find that as I'm getting older, I am leaning on caffeine a little bit more, which is fine as long as you are monitoring your anxiety level, your heart rate, your blood pressure. My blood pressure on a bad day is 90/60. So again, and I'm a rapid metabolizer on top of that. There you have it.
I love that. And I know that you got some pushback when you admitted to using caffeine. I think in the beginning, people were like, wait a minute, what, he uses caffeine. But I think it speaks to the nuance, to the bigger picture, right? We can talk about the detriments, but there's also benefits and there's a healthy and strategic way to go about it. So tell it, you want to talk about that controversy and where people can connect with you. I'm happy you persevered again.
It's one of those things where the way our brain is wired for black and white, because black and white is so easy. And the brain's always looking for the easiest way to use information. Because everyone wants it to be black and white, but it isn't. And just like you say, there is a nuance to it. There is the individualized evaluation of the effect of this drug. And because of that, some people get angry when I say, yeah, I consume caffeine. And they go, you wrote Caffeine Blues. How can you say that? I want the world to be black and white. You're a hypocrite. You're a terrible person. And it's a firestorm of activity, social media. When I was interviewed by Esquire magazine, and I mentioned that I consume 3 cups of coffee a day. And some people thought that was just the worst thing that I could possibly do, like I was a child molester. But no, this is really something that requires exploration and understanding. First of all, if you're a slow metabolizer, you're going to have you're going to have to be more careful than if you're a rapid metabolizer. If you're a man, you're going to be far more tolerant of caffeine than if you're a woman. It changes according to a woman's cycle. So there is that consideration too. You may find that in a certain part of your cycle, if you have that third cup of coffee, you become a rage-o-matic, right? So you need to be mindful of that. Ask your spouse, if your behavior has changed in any way. So all these things are important. But again, it's the intelligent approach is to look at your peace of mind, both during the day and especially at night. When you go to bed and your head hits that pillow, you should be asleep in the next 15 minutes max. That's normal. That's natural. And again, if you're not, look at your caffeine level, number one. And number two, look at your exercise. Because remember, your brain is checking in, right? Hey, how are we doing? It seems to me that it's time for us to go to sleep. Muscles, how are you doing? If muscles don't say, I'm tired, if instead the muscles are saying to your brain, hey, why are we laying down? We haven't done anything all day, right? Then that's the message that you have to deal with. Your muscles should be tired and your brain should be tired and you should sleep like a rock. That's the way we want you to be.
Beautifully stated. And the last thing before I want you to tell people where to connect with you is also, I'm big on nutrient deficiency and nutrient excretion. That happens with caffeine too. And so I'm replenishing my sodium, magnesium, my calcium, making sure that I'm taking iron, like liver capsules, whatever. On the days I take caffeine, I'm more mindful that I also replenish. And so tell us, Stephen, what is next for you? Where can people connect with you? And is there anything you think we missed that you'd like to highlight?
No, this was a very comprehensive interview. I've done so many of these, but Autumn, thank you. This was not only comprehensive, but very insightful. So bravo. People can reach me. The best place is probably my2048. My2048.com is the easiest way. My email is my first name followed by my last name, CHERNISKE, Stephen with the PH, and that's followed by the number 108 at Gmail. If they want to email me, that's fine too. And the reason why my 2048 is because in 2048, I'll be 100. So that's the goal of that website, is making sure that we all get to at least 100 in terms of longevity. So there's that focus of my work with my wife is we are anti-aging pioneers. So you can read about us on my2048.com.
Yeah, I sincerely hope you do, because look at the vitality. I can only hope to be able to achieve what you're doing. You're such a source of inspiration. And what I've noticed about you is you like take a topic and you just attack it. And you go deep and you provide a lot of value and you're a healthy skeptic and lots of wisdom there. So I hope you go check out his stuff. And I hope that you'll join me for a podcast about hormones in the future. You'll do it.
And probably we'll have Natalie on that with me because she has specialized for 30 years on women's health. So she will be a very important part of that discussion.
Okay. Thank you again, Stephen. I just think it's so important, the work you're doing, that you're not taking a terrible stance on caffeine, that you're saying, let's use it intelligently. I love your work and thanks for being here.
Thank you, Autumn. My pleasure.